I was able to upgrade my CPU cooler, but it was not a fun process. Let me give you some background why I even decided to upgrade my CPU cooler. First of all, it looks good. Almost all of the PC builds out there already have a liquid cooler installed right off the bat. I'm probably one of the last one to build a PC with a stock cooler. And the second reason, my thermals were really bad. My CPU was getting really hot. It was reaching 95 degrees, which is the max temperature your CPU, at least for AMD, should be at. Which for electronics is really bad. You don't want to get your electronics really hot. And for CPUs, once it reaches that temperature, it throttles the speed to save the chip from burning, which means you lose performance. And I use my PC for a lot of CPU heavy tasks like encoding, decoding, and video rendering, so it was really time to get a decent cooler to keep my temperatures low. I decided to go with the Corsair H150 RGB. This one is the model without the IQ software, and this one costs around 6,500 pesos, which for liquid coolers of this size, 360 millimeters, is really cheap. I wanted to go with those that have an LED in the pump and the CPU cooler itself, but those are really expensive, like 3 times the price that you'd pay for this one. So the Corsair H150 RGB is a 360mm cooler with addressable RGBs and a noise level of about 7 to 28 decibels. Is that worth your money? Let's find out. First off, this comes in a big box. That's because it's really big. It's really well packaged, and in my opinion, it provides good protection for the device. Inside the box you get the cooler, 3 RGB fans, mounting options for AMD and Intel, all the screws you need for both, and the warranty card. I would have wanted to have a decent manual that comes within the box, but unfortunately it's not there. More on this later. Okay, moving on to the build quality. For the most part, AIO coolers are made up of the same materials: plastic, aluminum, and copper. And most of the metal will not be seen anyway. The plastic that was used for this one was really good. It doesn't feel brittle or easy to break. And I also like the quality of the tube. This feels durable and not easy to kink. And the size and dimension is pretty standard. You won't see a lot of differences there if you compare to different AIOs, because they have to fit certain PC cases. A lot of the differences that you will see with these coolers are with the RGB, the fans, and the cooler itself. This looks really nice in my opinion. I would really love those LEDs in the more premium ones, but for this price, I'm not really complaining. Okay, so a little bit of disclaimer here. I am not a PC builder by profession, nor do I consider myself a PC building expert. I have built a few PCs in my lifetime, and I enjoy upgrading and building them. But like everyone else, I make mistakes, and I probably made a few of them here too. And by the way, if you have tips on how to install liquid coolers, and if you have suggestions on which ones are the good ones, comment down below. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get on with the installation. For me, this was really not an easy installation. This is my first time installing a liquid cooler, but I've watched enough videos to understand the right orientation to install it and some of the do's and don'ts. But even with that, there's still a lot of things that I did not expect. First of all, the manual. This one doesn't come with the manual inside the box. You get a QR code that you can scan with your phone, and it points you to an online manual. So if you're like me that only has one PC to install a liquid cooler to, you won't be able to see the manual in a bigger screen or in a monitor. And it's really hard staring at a small screen to understand what you need to do for a fairly complex process. Not to mention the manual itself is not easy to understand. I would have wanted them to include like a full-sized manual inside the box so that I wouldn't have to look at my phone. And one more thing I did not expect was the CPU being stuck to the stock cooler. It's been a while since I reapplied thermal paste to my CPU, but I did not expect it to get stuck with my CPU cooler. When I removed the stock cooler, at first I did not even realize that it came with the CPU. But when I realized it, I panicked. If you didn't know, PC processors are very sensitive. They have lots of pins under them, and if you bend any of those, it will not work anymore. And I am not looking forward to spending a lot of money just to upgrade my CPU because I bent it in this installation. But fortunately, I was able to remove it from the stock cooler, insert it again, and continue with the installation. Once I had the CPU back in, I cleaned it to remove the old thermal paste, and I cleaned the whole PC too. After taking everything out and cleaning it, I was ready to put everything back in. Of course, I went with the liquid cooler first. And with my case, there's only really one way to install it. You have to install it at the top with the tubes to the left. And that was really it. After that, I just needed to put everything back in the case. And to be honest, it looks better now. Initially, I just had fans at the top. I didn't have fans at the bottom, but now it looks more complete. So after all that, we should see improvements, right? Spoiler alert, there are definitely improvements. Here's a quick look of how the results were. Before adding the cooler, I was maxing out the temps of my CPU doing benchmarks. After I installed the cooler, I was getting decent temps and of course an improvement in performance. And I'm really happy with the performance boost. Personally, I feel the biggest difference is when I'm editing videos. When I'm gaming, it feels about the same. There's no significant improvement there. So, should you get a liquid cooler if you have a stock cooler on your PC? If you want a performance boost, then the answer is yes. It doesn't necessarily need to be a liquid cooler. There are air coolers out there that does the job pretty well, and those are generally easier to install. And if you don't want to go through the exciting journey of installing the cooler yourself, you can always have it installed by PC professionals. Don't get me wrong, I like building PCs and upgrading it, but sometimes there is an unexpected stress involved. And that's the end of the video. Click right here if you want to see more videos about PC monitors, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.